Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I am one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 4, Episode 26, Broken Link. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and X as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct. And as I say, every single week you should find us and follow us because we are awesome. I really believe that we're probably one of the better podcasts that are out there. Just for the sake of saying that we cover very thoroughly the episodes and some of the overall lore. Not going to say that we're the most entertaining, even if I happen to personally feel that way. But anyway, we're great. We're awesome. We're a good time. So just come in and enjoy what we're doing over here at the Fire Caves. Um, so yeah, really quick, I just have to remark 26 episodes. We are averaging 26 episodes a season. It is so bizarre because none of the new Trek shows do that. They typically are at a 10 to 12 episode run. Some shows
Yep.
even doing just 8 episodes. So it's just it's definitely a sign of the times that they were cranking out 26 episodes a season.
Right.
And some of the shows, like we there was a figure that was done recently, and like all the new shows would have to run for double or even triple the time in order to get to the same number of episodes that some of the older shows have. So think about it, like Discovery, for example. In order to get the same number of episodes, it would have to have something like 18 seasons at the
Wow.
rate that they do
Right.
episodes now,
Yeah.
something like that. So anyway, we
That's a
are here to
lot.
talk about Broken Link, and it is a lot. And we're going to get into a lot of that and some extra stuff because we have some great things coming up for afterwards. But before we do all that, before we jump into the meat of our episode, David, how was your week?
It's been fine. Yesterday is when we normally record our episodes, and as I think I've mentioned last week, I was getting together with some friends to play a board game called Twilight Imperium. We spent a good 12 to 13 hours yesterday playing that game. We started at 11 in the morning, got done sometime after midnight. So we played one single board game in one sitting that took, yes, that long. It's a lot of fun. I had a good time. It's the first time I ever played it. But yeah, that's what
I
I
don't
was
think I
doing
could do it.
yesterday. Yeah,
I don't think I can do
it's a
it. I
lot.
mean, yeah, that just sounds like a lot. 12 hours, 13 hours. Yeah, I don't think I could make it on a board game. I mean, there's not very much that I could do that on without some kind of prolonged break somewhere in
Oh,
there.
for sure. I mean, I had to take off work to do it,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
But that was a lot of fun. Did that yesterday. This upcoming week, we'll be going to Virginia to visit family. Looking forward to visiting Monticello, which is going to be a part of the trip for us. Yeah, Jefferson's home, Thomas Jefferson's
Mhm.
home to be exact. And yeah, just seeing my grandmother. So she's about to move out of her house she's lived in for the last, gosh, maybe 15 years or so. To move in with my aunt and gonna go see her and the rest of the family and basically see everybody. It'll be a very busy 6 day trip. So yeah. How about you? What you up to?
All right, pretty much same. Workouts, child rearing, rinse, repeat. We don't have, and we didn't really do much this week that was different, but this coming week, on the weekend, as a matter of fact, the first weekend of October, we're going to take a little family trip down to Fredericksburg, and
Nice.
just kind of do a little, again, family trip, see the sights, hang out. My sister and brother-in-law and a couple of family friends are going to come with us. Basically people that have children, and we're kind of doing this little, family get together for everybody. Kids are out of school this upcoming that again that first weekend. They get like a 4-day break because apparently that's a thing now. So
Nice.
we're gonna take advantage of at least 2 of those days and do some, yeah, family building stuff.
Right.
So looking forward to that. So yeah, we'll
Right.
see.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's it for me. And so let's go ahead and get right into our episode here, Broken Link. Did you want to give the recap, or did you want me to do it?
I'm happy to do it. This is an Odo heavy episode. I know Odo's your favorite character. Do you want to give it a go?
Yeah, yes. Yes, I'll do it. And I think it's interesting, just by happenstance, a happy coincidence, whatever. I watched a show today with my mother that actually featured Renee Auberjonois, very young Renee, on a show called Benson, which I don't know if any of you know anything about this show, but it's about this um, black man whose name is Benson, who ends up working in the governor for the governor in I forget what state they were in, but he's working in the governor's mansion and so forth, and he's the budget advisor or something like that. And then Renee's character, he's like the uh, what do you call him? The chief of staff, I think was what his title was.
Okay.
So it was really interesting to see him, and like I didn't recognize him at first, but the voice is the telltale giveaway, you know.
Yeah.
But he had, you know, he was, you know, very tall, very slender. He's got this, you know, feathery hair and whatever else, and he's got a mustache and all that. And I it took me a second, but like I was in another room and I heard him speaking, I was like, "What is that?" And came out and, you know, there he was. And I was like, "That kinda sounds like Renee," and then the name in the opening credits flashed across the
Nice.
screen. I was like, "It is," and I watched it again. So, yeah, apparently he was a series regular on that show, and, it's a very comedic, nice family show. You can watch it at any time, but again, it's an older show, so if you have any kind of interest in things like that, check it out. Again, it's called Benson.
Gotcha.
So, but this episode, again called Broken Link, is kind of a follow up continuation of season three's closing episode, The Adversary. So,
Right.
quick synopsis reminder of The Adversary. This is the episode where Cisco gets promoted, and we hear about the Zenkethi, who the Federation had been in a war with some years ago. And there's an ambassador who comes onto the station and wants Cisco to take the Defiant and go kind of, you know, show the colors basically, and let them know that, you know, the Federation is aware that they've got some kind of political upheaval going on, and that we're not going to tolerate any kind of nonsense on our side of the border. This all turns out to be an elaborate ruse by the Dominion, just to kind of get the Defiant out there and cause trouble themselves. And through the investigation of everybody on the ship, they realize that the ambassador is actually a changeling who's trying to sabotage them. And Odo is put in a position to where he ultimately kills this changeling in order to save our crew and, of course, the Defiant. So now to follow this up, here we are all this time later, several months later, and Odo starts his day by being called into Garrick's shop, and Garrick is clearly trying to arrange this meeting with another shop owner on the station, this Bajoran woman who apparently has taken shine to Odo and his extremely punctual rounds making that he would do on the promenade. um you know, they have their little meeting and then she goes about her business, you know, and Odo kind of sort of gets into Garrick a bit about trying to set things up and arrange things for him. And as he attempts to leave Garrick's shop, he is suddenly hit by some kind of weird attack. He starts to lose molecular cohesion and passes out in the office
Right.
or in the shop. We then see him in the infirmary where they're realizing that his body is in some kind of odd state of flux, and Bashir can't do anything about it. The more they try, the worse his body gets. They try to distract Odo with, you know, work and things like that while they're trying to figure this out. Odo realizes that through reading of the station's criminal report that there's a Boslik captain who's back on the station that is clearly a smuggler, and he's wanting to stop her. She's taking advantage of the fact that he is otherwise indisposed and trying to quickly move some merchandise off of the station. But Odo shows up, attempts to stop her, fully loses cohesion, and just kind of dissolves into a puddle of goo in the cargo bay while the captain and her crew make their escape. We find out that someone eventually finds Odo and they're able to get him back to the infirmary where he's now even worse. And realizing that they don't have the ability to fix whatever is wrong with him, Cisco and company decides to take the Defiant into the Gamma Quadrant, start broadcasting a signal that's letting the Dominion forces know they're in the Gamma Quadrant and know the reason why they're in the Gamma Quadrant,
Right.
which works. Several Jem'Hadar ships show up, surround the Defiant, and on board eventually beams a contingent of Jem'Hadar with the female changeling founder that we saw for the first time all the way back in, I think there was also a season 3 episode, Heart of Stone, where she impersonated Kira to figure
Right.
out why Odo wanted to stay with the solids instead of coming with his own people when he realized who they were.
Right.
So now she's back. She temporarily stabilizes Odo's condition. She and Odo talk, and it's revealed that they did this to Odo as retribution for him killing that other changeling. And they were
Right.
forcing him to return home so that he could be judged. Because, as we know from them telling us multiple times, the founders have one sacred rule, which is no changeling has ever harmed another. So, in the entire history of their people, their culture, their civilization, no changeling has ever harmed another changeling. And now Odo has not only harmed one, he's killed one. So they're forcing him to come back to be judged by his people.
Right.
They go to the founder's home planet, but side note on that, the founders employ a scrambling device that keeps the Defiant from
Tracking
recording,
word. Yeah.
yeah, tracking where they are. They beam down to the planet. Cisco and Bashir go with Oda when they beam down. The changeling warns them that they could be in the Great Link during this whole arbitration, deliberation, whatever, for days or even weeks until they figure out what's going on. Cisco's like, okay, we'll wait. I don't care. So there's this one giant rock apparently in a sea of changelings, which never really made sense to me, I have to admit. Like, is it legitimately a rock outcropping, or is it some changelings pretending to be a rock that they're sitting on? Like,
Good question.
it doesn't
I
make
didn't
any
even
sense
think
like
about that.
why it's there. It's just, yeah, it's just this giant pillar of rock, a rock formation in the middle of everything else that they are. So it's just like I just wondered about that. Like, did they become a place to beam down for them and then just stayed that way the whole time they were waiting? I don't know. So anyway, while this is happening on board the Defiant, I also forgot to mention Garrick went with them. And so Garrick had gone with them with the intent of asking the founders about the um, Romulan Cardassian contingent that had also in season 3 attempted to wipe out the founders on their other home planet.
Right.
The female changeling informs him that they're all dead. Like, there's no survivors from that whatsoever, and that everybody else is also dead. That they have every intent to kill everybody. So this pretty much makes Garrick psychopathic and homicidal, and decides that genocide is really the only thing they can do. So he tries to hack into the Defiant systems to get a hold of the weapons to destroy the planet. And he's stopped in this by Worf, who is like, "Yeah, we're not murderers, we're not whatever." And they have this weird kind of philosophical: is it okay to commit genocide if it saves billions upon billions of other people and all this stuff? It leads to a fist fight, which Garrick is surprisingly adept at fighting Worf. I mean, Worf wins, of course, but I always thought that the reason that he was able to land so many blows on Worf in the first place was sheerly out of surprise. I don't think that Worf really expected Garrick to put up any kind of fight, let alone skilled fighting. And that's why he's able to beat up Worf a little bit before Worf finally is like, "Yeah, I'm Worf," and
Yeah.
slaps him around.
Yeah.
So he stops Garrick from doing what he's going to do. The deliberations back on the planet are finally over. The changelings deposit Odo up on the same rocky embankment, and in this, they have made him human as part of his punishment. They did not kill him. They decided that they would make him human. They beam back to the Defiant. They're able to go home. And now we see a human Odo who still has his changeling face, which is basically another part of the punishment, to remind him of what he used to be and what he's lost.
Right.
So instead of making him just fully appear human, he still looks like a changeling, but again, human organs and so forth.
Right.
Um, he's trying to adjust to this life. He's finding it very difficult now. He recognizes, just exactly what it is he's lost. But in the midst of all this, he is having these headaches, which has to do with him being in the Great Link. There was all this stuff that was going on that they were apparently trying to keep from him. And upon seeing Gowron, the emperor, or the leader of the Klingon people up on a monitor, he recognizes that one of the things the founders were trying to keep from him was that Gowron is a changeling, that the changelings have somehow replaced OG Gowron with changeling Gowron. And this is also going back to the greater arcing story that was going on in the episode where the Klingons are basically on the warpath and they were just letting everybody know that they were annexing
Right.
some spaces. They weren't going to give up the territory they had won in their first conflict with the Cardassians. And now here's Gowron back on screen doing some more warmongering. And so
Right.
now that's how the episode ends. A bit of a cliffhanger of, oh my God, Odo has just revealed that Gowron, leader of the Klingon High Council, is actually a changeling.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right.
So there.
Yeah.
That is essentially the episode. Again, if you want to get all the little bits and bobs and details, please go watch it. And you can watch this episode and all Treks except for Prodigy for some strange reason. You can watch all of them on Paramount Plus. So go do it. Go watch it and then come and listen to our show wherever you happen to listen to the podcast. But that is it. So, as always, David, as our first time viewer, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, it's a big change for Odo to go from being able to do his changeling abilities to now he's a human. I was a little surprised they made him a human because I was like, would they make him to a Bajoran? Because that's who he's known, that's who he's close to. That's where the station is. The problem though with that is they'd have to change his facial mask, the Bajoran ridge or something like that. Um, it's easier, at least on a physical features level, to make him human. Um, there's that bit at the end where Bashir is taking blood tests and he says, "You're blood O type O," in case you were wondering. So he's officially human now with with a changeling face. Still has his changeling face, as you mentioned. He has to go at the very end of the episode to Garrick to get fitted for his first actual outfit. He's always just been a changeling. His outfits were always just a part of him. This is the first one he actually has to wear. And, it's a little itchy, first time wearing clothes. Um, but yeah, I first thought that I thought the reason he was having trouble holding his form at first is because this beautiful blonde woman was like, "Hey," and he was like,
Oh,
I thought
he
maybe he
was
was.
he was so taken by her beauty that he couldn't hold it together,
Well,
literally.
I mean, but I was immediately like, well, he liked Kira, and that wasn't a problem. So that theory is very thin, but that was partially my theory.
Hey, maybe he's got a thing for blondes. I mean, redheads are fun, but this is the first time we've seen a blonde
Yeah, I mean, she
um
came out of that changing room with
Bajoran.
her dress and she was swooping it around. Like she had
Hmm.
totally planned this exit. It was obvious that she and Garrick were in cahoots, um, which was funny. I like the idea of Garrick playing matchmaker. If you can't be, if being a tailor is kind of boring, then and being a spy and being a matchmaker seem more in common. You're manipulating people and a bit. So
Wow.
yeah,
So spies are good at
matchmaking
dating. Yeah, at
and
matchmaking.
matchmaking. Yeah.
Huh.
Um, I like that she was forward. She was like, "I want you to come see me. I want you to do something." And then, Garrett gives
Have
him a
dinner
hard.
with me and
Yeah,
yeah,
I
say
want.
hi and come hang out and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if she was a consolation prize for Kira, I wouldn't be upset. I mean, we just met her. I'm just kidding, obviously. But part of me is like, I would like to know if something's there. I'd like to see them go on a date, see if Odo can pull out of his normally morose, uh, kind of bitter, kind of depressing persona in order to go
Mm.
on a date per se. See if she's the type of woman who would be willing to, kind of put up with some of that if she's actually got some stuff that works with Odo as a partner. So obviously, at the end of the episode, she shows up again, and we might have something there. It'd be great if something does, but I mean, this is the end of season 4. Season 5 was probably several months away, so whether they're going to keep an actress on to play a role like that, who knows? Um, but Yeah, the biggest change, of course, is Odo is now not a changeling anymore, which is big. I mean, that's basically been his character. I mean, how much of what he does is dependent on him being a changeling? Is his strength based on his being a changeling? Like, he seemed kind of superhuman in his strength at times. I don't know how
Mhm.
accurate that actually is. If I were to calculate how many times I've seen him make a physical action, was he acting in a physically stronger way than I would expect otherwise? I remember one episode where he used his ability to like reach out, like he took a gun off a Maquis member in one of the Maquis episodes. Like he reached out with his hand and stretched it out and grabbed a gun, stuff like that.
Well, let's not forget that when First Minister Shakar was on the station and there was the assassination attempt, and
Right.
they had the falling turbo lift, he pressed into the
Yes.
sides of the turbo lift to slow it down.
Right.
So he's obviously he's able to generate the strength to slow down this falling metal construct that contains himself, Kira, Shakar, and then whatever else is in there. He's able to
Exactly.
stop the whole mechanism entirely. So
Exactly.
he can clearly generate a lot of force, a lot of strength as a changeling,
Right.
which he now would lose. I would assume that in making him human, they put him at human equivalent normal-ish strength, you know.
Right.
Um yeah, I mean we obviously have strong people, but that comes through training and development. But still, even the strongest human that you know is still going to be no match for a Klingon, for
Right.
example. So
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is that um, how well is Odo going to be able to continue doing his job if he is now just a normal person, if you will? Of course, we've seen him do multiple times where he impersonates an object, and then that
Hmm.
he uses that to either infiltrate something, overhear something, all
Hmm.
kinds of things. So how much of his work and his job was he was being efficient? At the end of the episode, Cisco says, "You're probably the best law enforcement officer in the whole quadrant. That's how good you are at what you do." And I don't doubt that certainly on a mental and committed, he's committed to the job. But the question I would say is like, is that how
How?
much of that is
Hmm.
him being very capable with his abilities?
Right.
Again,
He's
not
highly effective spy, infiltrator, gathering evidence because people don't see
right,
him, whatever. Can he still be as effective now that he does not have those abilities to be a chair or a glass or whatever?
exactly. The
So,
other question too is like if he was able to basically, if he had no needs, he didn't need to sleep, he didn't need to eat like us. I mean, he had to be in his form, his bucket. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's not in his bucket, but if he could, now he has to eat. What kind of other things does he need to do? Does he have other desires? Does he need to use the restroom, for example? If he could have held his shape for 16 hours straight, therefore he could, pretend to be something for 16 hours straight. Does he now need every 4 hours to go to the restroom now? I don't know. That's not a question that we're gonna get answered. Obviously, I'm
they
theorizing all the way
they
out.
never answer the bathroom question on Star
No,
Trek,
I
but
as soon as I
you
said it, I was
know,
like,
yeah,
what am I doing?
that's never going to be answered. But other questions, which I guess you can kind of think in a roundabout way, it does provide an answer. You know, like now that he's human, does this mean he's going to have to sleep in a bed? Is he going to have quarters? Is he going
Right.
to? I mean,
Yes.
we already know he has quarters, but now is he going to have to change it because we know in his quarters beforehand he's had all the stuff for shape shifting. Well, he's not a
Right.
shapeshifter anymore, so he's going to keep that stuff around, constant reminder again of what he's lost, or is he going to
Right.
try to assimilate more and remove that stuff and have traditional furniture, comfortable chairs to sit in, a
Right.
bed to sleep on? Yes, his shift, you know,
Right.
he made his shift coincide with his regenerative cycle so that, you know, whenever he wasn't on duty, he was off regenerating or whatever. But now,
Right.
is he going to adjust the schedule so that he can take breaks and do
Right.
naps and have
Well,
lunch? And I mean,
well,
we
we
even see in the episode, he's like, I think I'm hungry. Like he experiences
yes.
the feeling of hunger for the first time.
And Garrick is
Um,
like, "Oh, that's a great thing. You'll get to taste food all for the first time. I am Odo to your Garrick in this in the Fire Caves comparative story.
Yes, that is
I'm
correct.
I'm
All of these
tasting
things
all
are
the
new.
episodes for the first
Yes, all
time.
this is new to you. This is the first time. Whereas I'm like, I envy that you get to watch this show that I love so much for the first time. I wish that I could do that.
Yep,
Fall in love
yep.
with it all over again instead of having to look for new reasons to love it. You
Right,
know,
right.
yeah. Which this show does for me, by the way. This podcast does that for me because I get to talk about it, and I'm like, yeah, and this was great, and this and this, and did you know this, and all that. That
Yeah,
helps me, which is why we, kind of do this podcast in the first place. So,
exactly. There you go.
um,
This is your attempt to get all your love out into one space and
mhm,
express it in full. Yep.
that's right.
But yeah, this
I
is
have so few loves. I have so few loves in life. So
yeah,
here we go.
yeah. Poor Perry. I was a little surprised, and I was, I guess, a little disappointed when the changeling woman, who doesn't even have a name,
Nope,
when
she's just
she's
female changeling or female shapeshifter, whatever one you want to call her.
yeah, when they said that we did this to you, I was a little frustrated because there was never any clear indication. Like I said, I thought maybe it was he was attracted to the female Bajoran, and so he was like affected by that in some unexpected way. Like that was my initial reaction. There or Garrick did something to him. There was nothing that ever really made clear how or why. I'm not how. Why? I'm sorry, not the why. How they did it to Odo? How did they make Odo get into this state? What did they infect him with something? Is it a machine? Some like little
Mhm,
device that causes him to lose his shape? I mean, it does seem to be actually have some sort of illness. To be clear, it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be internal. Is what I'm getting at.
mhm,
I would have rather even them explained that we knew that this would happen eventually. After when you were last with us at the Great Link, we knew you had only about 2 more years left before your separation from us would cause this to happen. Something like that. So I was a little frustrated. They just kind of like, oh yeah, we did this to you. Like okay,
yeah.
I mean whatever.
So that is one of the few, continuity errors that crop up with this episode because they, like you said, they say in the episode, "We did this to you," but there's some other dialogue in the episode that's supposed to imply this was done to Odo when he refused to return to the Great Link in that "To the Death" episode, the one that we watched with the Jem'Hadar who were
Right.
had to go when we were attacked by the when the station was attacked and Cisco and company went
Ah,
off to find them, and there was
right.
Wei Yun and the other
Right.
Jem'Hadar who were
Right.
also attacked.
Something around that episode during
Yes,
that
so
episode happened.
it's
Okay.
implied that there's a scene where Wei Yun is alone with Odo, and he asks Odo to return to the Great Link. Then Odo says no, and there was supposed to be a scene that's filmed where Wayun graciously accepts that Odo has turned them down once again, and he's supposed to shake Odo's hand or pat him on the shoulder or something. And in that moment, he was infected. But we
Right.
never actually see that happen. They just kind of sort of hint to it, which I feel like for setting up stories, that was a mistake to not show that because that would have
Yeah.
been a great little thing to quickly,
Foreshadow.
yeah, and
Yeah.
throw back to in this episode. Because
Yeah.
other than that, Oda hasn't really had a whole lot of contact with changelings.
Right.
So it would have been, yeah, that would have been the smart thing to do. Um, but whatever. So yeah, but
Right.
I agree. Like, I feel like that was a misstep by not showing us exactly how he was infected, especially, again, mild spoiler, considering what happens in later seasons.
Oh,
Things like this are going to be like, where, why will be the question. Why and where will be the
gotcha.
questions. So,
Gotcha. Huh. Okay.
and
All
don't
right.
worry, I'll be here to point those out when we get
Gotcha.
into, I believe that really comes up in like season 6. So we got a little bit. We got a little bit.
Gotcha. So, yeah, the fact that Galron is also a changeling obviously is huge because the beginning of this season, we got Worf joining the team, but he was joining because the Federation and the Klingons had a big falling out because the
Mhm.
Klingons decided to attack the Cardassians, and we're getting basically more of that. You know, they've, as you pointed out, they've consolidated their Cardassian conquests, and they want to move on to the what's the system? The Ardern
Arcanus.
Arcanus system, which apparently, according to our team, is on the other side of wherever. Like that's far away from them. It's not going to directly affect Deep Space Nine and our team, but as you said,
What a
yeah,
remarkably short-sighted thing that they say.
I
You
know.
know, when he
As
says, "Oh,
soon
well,
as they
that's a
said
long
that.
way from here, so
Yeah, I was like,
not on our purview." It's like, well, I mean, let's think about that strategically. It sounds like they're trying to surround you, and you're saying, "Ah, it's a long way away, and we don't have
right,
to worry about it. It's on the other side of the whatever." Yeah, it's on the other side, which means that when they finally do turn their attention to you, you will have them on two sides, at
right,
least that we know of.
right.
So, yeah, but yeah, as they say in the episode, Arcanus is a sector of space that now is firmly controlled by the Federation, but at one point was as a hub of some kind for the Klingon Empire, and now they want it back. And it was 100 years ago that they
Hmm.
had that sector, but now again they want it back. So they're looking
Yeah.
to get that back.
I just love the guy who plays Galron, Robert O'Reilly, I guess.
Robert,
Um,
yes, well,
I just love
he's
how
go ahead.
Galron always looks half insane with his. He's like we're gonna attack. You're gonna do what I say, and then like
It's the
it.
eyes. It's
Oh, he does a great job.
definitely the
The
eyes.
acting, yeah.
Yes.
But it totally makes sense that the Klingons. I'm sorry that the Changelings have a Klingon changeling. Someone who's been infiltrated, and of course the top. We already knew in this season, whichever episode it was, when they went back to Earth, and the admiral that used to be Cisco's superior officer. He had one at one point. There was someone
Admiral Layton.
masquerading as him. Yeah, so it makes sense that even the or even the Klingons have been affected by someone impersonating one of them, and of course, it's always the worst possible scenario is the leader of that faction, and boom, here we go. We got Galron himself as the changeling, according to what Odo tells us. So, great cliffhanger for season 4 into season 5.
Mhm. Fun little fact about the character of Gowron and those eyes and where all that comes from. So, as we should all hopefully remember, the very first time that we ever saw Gowron was in Star Trek: The Next Generation, and this
Right,
was when the then Klingon Chancellor Kempek was dying, and they needed to find a new ruler. And the two, I guess, most senior candidates were uh, Gowron and Duras. And
right,
obviously, we don't want Duras to lead because Duras is terrible. But
right,
Gowron was a kind of unknown upstart. He
right,
was they had some history of him, but he was kind of like on the outskirts. He did a lot of like deep space stuff, but no one really knew much about this guy. So he was the wild card. So it was like we certainly don't want to pick the devil we know because the devil we know is terrible. So we'd rather go with this other person, but they had to like not necessarily show favoritism. But
right.
while all that is interesting, the factoid that I wanted to tell is behind the scenes, and it's about Robert O'Reilly and those eyes. So apparently, when they were doing the filming and the filming test of the episode and everything, there is a scene where he's sitting in the Enterprise's observation room. The observation rounds where the officers do all their meetings at that long table.
Yep.
And so he's in there and he's talking. And at one point, he spins and he's confronting Worf and Picard. And he does the big eye pop thing.
Right.
Well, off screen, Jonathan Frakes saw him do this and loved it. And so the story goes that when they went to shoot the scene again, he didn't do it the second time, to
Oh,
which Jonathan Frakes told him to do it, went
right.
back to him and told him to do it, that it looked great, that it was interesting, whatever. And so he did, and it kind of became Gowron's signature thing. And it's in memes now, it's all over the place. But yeah, that whole eye pop thing that he does that really makes him kind of stand out and looks so menacing and terrifying, frankly, was all because Jonathan Frakes happened to see him do it and
He
said,
wasn't
"That's
directing that
awesome."
episode. He was just an actor on
He was
set
just
saying,
there. Yeah, he
"Yeah,
was just there that day. He
yeah,
he was not directing. He was just there
yeah,
and I guess I assume he was just waiting in the wings for his upcoming scenes, whatever those are going to be. And
right."
he saw this thing and was like, "Nah, man, you got to do it." And so he's been doing it ever since. So there you go.
Man, and history was made. as they say.
History was made once again. Jonathan Frakes doing stuff to make Star Trek better, which is like that's his whole thing. Like we could do a whole thing about how Jonathan Frakes is like on so many levels directed the course of Star Trek and made it better over time for his input and for his
Right,
insight and
right.
stuff. You know, it's just starting with season two when he grew the beard. Like there are so many people who seriously think Star Trek was saved because Riker grew a beard. Which it sounds ridiculous, but at the same time, uh, what a
Babyface Riker
conspiracy
definitely
theory.
looks funny in season one.
Yes, yes. He looks a little too young, a little too,
Who let this teenager on the bridge with
right.
that silly
Standing
Wesley Crusher kid?
right. Standing next to stately Jean-Luc. He just
Yeah.
looked a little too out of place. And then he grew the facial hair and that was like, "Oh, okay, he's the man.
Oh
Got
my
it."
goodness.
So, but yeah, so there's a lot of that, you know, and he's a prolific director. He's directed so many episodes of uh, all of the Trek shows. He got some directing in the latter part of Next Generation. He did Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise. He's done a lot of Strange New Worlds. He's done a lot of Discovery. I think the only one he hasn't actually officially directed is Lower Decks, which is an animated show. So
Right.
I don't
Makes
know.
sense.
Yeah,
Right.
but he's on Lower Decks. He's done a cameo a couple of times. So he's there, you know, if not behind the scenes, he's
Right.
there on it too. So yeah, Jonathan Frakes is definitely the man. So,
There you
but now
go.
back to this episode, of course. Yes, as we said, this was a heavy Odo episode. One of the things I like about this episode so much, not just because it does feature Odo, but it gives us a whole new context to consider Odo in. We always knew that, like, we knew him mainly as like the loner. He was isolated. He was an incredibly different alien. We have seen people in Trek who were cut off from their culture or whatever, but not to this extreme. You know, like Worf is probably a great example. You know, he's a Klingon on a Federation ship or whatever, but a lot of Worf's interactions with Klingons were mostly positive for him. Like, you know, in the Next Generation episode, Heart of Glory, I think it's called, where those two Klingons show up, they wanted Worf to join them.
Yes.
We see later on, you know, obviously he's got a complicated history with Kalar, but whatever. But yeah, other Klingons seem to like Worf, at least initially. It's not until later on that things kind of go south for him with other Klingons. But for the most part, even then, even when it goes south, it's like there are still opportunities for him to like redeem himself and do other things that will still allow him to have interactions. He makes some choices that kind of screw him up in some aspects, but he
Right.
still has at least a culture to reference and a culture that knows him. Odo, on the other hand, is a complete unknown. He's not Bajoran. He's certainly not human. He's not even from the same quadrant, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like he's totally alien, and he we finally see him reunited with his people, only to discover that they're the founders. They are the head of the Dominion, this massively powerful, threatening force. And
Right.
then, you know, he ends up killing one of them. He breaks their sacred law. Now he's been punished. His whole experience with his people so far has been terrible,
Yeah.
has been absolutely terrible. Like there was never a time when it was like, "Oh, wow, this is great. This is wonderful. This is whatever." No, they've done nothing but just be awful the whole
Yeah.
time. They lie to him, impersonate his friends and stuff. They're impersonating admirals and whatever else and sabotaging things and causing problems and getting the Tal Shiar and the Obsidian Order in bed together to blow them all up. I mean, they're just awful.
Yeah. 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 It's rough. Odo's had it pretty rough.
Yeah, he's had a real rough go of it, you know. And so now here we are once again, and apparently that transition from changeling to human was also pretty painful. We see him getting tossed around in the goop there a little bit
Yeah.
before he's finally deposited on that shore at Bashir and Cisco's feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it just seems like this whole episode was all about Odo just being really, you know, tortured. I will commend the guy for wanting to go back and face the music. He didn't have to, and yes, we know if he didn't go, he would have died. But he stopped everybody from coming up with, a clever Starfleet wink and nod, how we're going to get our hero out of it, you
Right.
know, and we
Yes.
see that a little bit. We see everybody kind of spitballing. Well, what if we did this? And what if we
Yes.
did this? All these things. And Odo comes in and squashes all of that. So,
Right.
yeah, I will commend him for that, for being consistent on that part of his character. He even says, I spent my whole life bringing people to justice for breaking the law. I did this. I want to
Right.
face the judgment. So
Right.
I
Yeah,
really
it's a
like
very
that.
yeah, it's a bold move for sure, but it also definitely fits with Odo's character. It's yeah, he's sent so many people to face justice, and now it's his turn. But he did do something. He did kill. I mean, it was a justified killing, we can say, of the guy who he did kill. It wasn't like a murder. It was like they were tussling, and um,
It was an accident, really. He didn't
yeah,
mean to push the guy into the warp core. They
exactly,
were fighting, and if you remember, the guy attacked him first.
right,
So it was self-defense that then tumbled into an accident.
right,
So I really feel like the change. I mean, I guess you know they could have killed him. When they took Odo and everything, they could have killed him. So the fact that they
right,
didn't kill him, they just turned him human. I mean, yeah, is it's not necessarily a harsh punishment because he's
right,
still alive and he's still able to, you know, he could adapt. He could um learn to enjoy life again as a human,
right,
but we are supposed to take this as a serious, loss because of how much he really enjoyed being a changeling and being a part of this specialness, and now it's been taken from him.
right.
So,
Yeah. One of the other things I like about this episode is I feel like this episode did a whole lot more to really make sure we feel like a lot of the crew was involved. We have a minor scene with Kira at the beginning. Kira can't come along on this trip because someone needs to watch the station, and she's sneezing a lot because she's pregnant.
hmm
um, it was kind of funny because it was a little on the nose, where it's like she's sneezing, 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 and they do a little bet, like how many sneezes is she gonna make, and Cisco, of course, wins the bet. Um, so that's why she's not there for most of the episode. And then Quark, when Odo is leaving to go get on the Defiant, Quark walks up to him and basically says, "Well, this will be great that you're gone because I can now smuggle up to 60%. My smuggling profits will go up by 60%." But you can tell it's one of those "I'm
Yeah,
sorry to see
again,
you going" kind of
yeah,
things, like the
I'm
love
just
hate
trying to make
relationship.
sure, right? I'm making sure that you're coming back. That's why
Right,
I'm doing this. I
right,
want to hear you say that you're coming back. So,
right.
yeah, it's like a nod of respect. They're not friends, but they're not totally enemies either.
Yes,
So,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
we
then
did
we
get to see
have
a little bit of everybody. We've got O'Brien on the bridge of the Defiant, and he's kind of musing about what was he talking about? Like, I don't even remember what he was talking about.
the ship's the cloaking device.
That's right.
He's been on
They
half a dozen
mhm.
ships, but this is the first one with a cloaking device, and the fact that it's not on makes him feel naked. And Worf says something similar, and Cisco says, "Yes, gentlemen, I feel the breeze." And then Dax laughs at them all and says, uh, and
He says,
O'Brien's
"What are
like,
you
"Why are you
laughing at?"
laughing?"
And she
And she's like,
says, "Never been around so many naked men," or
"All
something
right,
like that.
yeah, but she's been a man herself as a Trill."
Yeah.
So it's funny because they basically were all using, "Yeah, I feel naked," and then the one woman on the bridge also is just making fun of him for it. Um,
So
yeah,
two things. One, I love scenes like that where
yeah,
they're just kind of shooting the breeze. There's nothing going on, nothing to do. And I mean, even O'Brien, he's turned away from the console. He's kind of leaned back in his chair. He's got his hands,
right,
at his midsection. He's just kind of like, again, it's just a total do nothing musing scene.
right.
And he's just like just talking, and everybody's just kind of taking. I love scenes like that.
Well, there's
Um,
another one too because O'Brien at first was saying that I saw Keiko and Kira talking together when I walked in my quarters, and they stopped talking. And Molly giggled when I walked in. So I think they were all
Mhm.
talking about me, and it's one of those like O'Brien's getting paranoid basically, and he's like, I need to invite Bashir to come join us in our quarters so that I at least have another person on my
Good
side.
lord, the O'Briens have a party going on at their
Yeah.
place. They've got,
Well, it's funny too because
Keiko,
in real
Miles,
life,
Molly, Kira, and the upcoming baby, and then throw Bashir in there as well.
well,
Man,
if Nana Visitor's father of her child was actually um, Dr. Bashir's actor's name, I can't remember at the moment. That's just
Alexander Sadiq.
there you go. That just makes it all the more on the nose. They were married by this point, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
they were the two actors, Nana and Alexander, were married at the time. Um, I
Part of
think there
their
would have been a
whirlwind
little
romance.
funny, like B or even like C story that would have been like a long running gag was that they all were living together and having these issues and like arguing with each other and stuff. And so then it would be like petty arguments. Nothing major to like truly disrupt like friendships or whatever. But like
Right.
I think it would be hilarious to like we would hear little snippets of the O'Briens, the true O'Briens, were bickering with the with Kira and Bashir, who for some reason were always on each other's side, and no one could figure out why they were always siding with each other against the O'Briens. And it would be just stupid things like they want dinner at 4:45 versus 6 o'clock, or well, again, little nonsensical things that would make sense as like these are stupid couple arguments,
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. I thought that would have been funny
Right.
to see, but yeah, but this wasn't the show for funny. Deep Space Nine is not the show for funny. The other thing I want to say, because I said two things, so that was the first. The other thing, that phrase half a dozen times, I can't stand it. I hate it when I hear it. It's the most annoying. It doesn't make sense to me why people say half a dozen times. Just say
Say
six.
six.
Just
Yeah.
say six. Why do you have to say, well, I've
Yeah.
told you at least half a dozen times? Just say you said it 6 times.
Yeah.
Why the extra words? I know it's a stupid
Sounds
thing that
smart. Yeah.
gets me irate, and whatever it is. But seriously, and you know what? The number of shows that do it is
Well,
alarming.
yeah, I guess shows do it more often than in real life, right? Yeah, it's like a
I
I'm
can't think of
smart.
the last time I said half a dozen
Yeah.
and didn't legitimately mean no, no. I don't think I've ever really said it. Give
Yeah.
me
You just say six.
I might have said give me a half dozen, but that was in direct reference to eggs. Give me a half dozen of
Right.
eggs. But I've never said it for anything else.
You've
I've
never
never
said
said
baker's dozen either, I bet.
no, no.
Just say
I now
13.
right. I need 13 of these.
Right.
Or I have 13. I've never
Right.
said, "Oh, I've got a baker's dozen." No. That's not how people talk. I
Yeah.
don't know where that phrase came from, but there are so many shows that do it, that say it. They have a character somewhere in the thing that says, "Oh, well, I must have been there about a half dozen times." Why can't you say 6? Can someone explain that to me? Why that phrase became so popular and so ubiquitous across the TV, lexicon, whatever. Why? Just why? And if we could get away from saying it, I would be so thrilled because it's just a phrase that just doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. Just say six. Be precise because at least a half a dozen. Okay. So again, that's at least six, right? But you could be, there's some wiggle room in there. Like when people say a few, okay, three or more. Is it four? Did you do three? Did you like what is with people not wanting to be precise? Just say
Yeah.
you should know. You should know. Did you go in that room half a dozen times or not? Okay, then say six.
Right.
Just be done. But that's it. And I think that Star Trek is the reason that that phrase sticks out to me so much because I've watched all of the shows and they all have someone at some point who says half a dozen. Don't know why. In a sci-fi show full of all this science and tech and everything else, why are they so imprecise? Say six. Say six, guys. Just
Yeah.
say it with me. Six. Promise. It won't hurt you. Six. Thank you. There's my rant. I must have ranted about this about half a dozen times.
Now you're not allowed to complain anymore. You've used up your complaining.
Oh man.
uh, um, what else happened this episode? I mean, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, there was no B plot.
No.
Oh, I guess I really thought they did a great job with Renee's costume. Like
Yeah, the
they messed
makeup
up
effects.
they messed up some
Yeah.
suits or whatever that gunk was. Yeah, whatever they did, they went
Yeah.
for it.
That was yeah, the overall the special effects on this episode were pretty great. I mean, we got to see Odo in various states of decay, falling apart,
I even saw
being
something drip
reduced.
off him once. Yeah,
Yeah, he gets reduced to the gelatinous mass in the cargo bay. We see the founders on their home world, the giant massive pool of changelings
right.
everywhere, and then them dissolving into it and then coming back out of it. A lot of great special effects here
Yeah,
in this
they spent
episode.
good money in this on this
Yeah.
episode for that stuff. Yeah, at that time, that must have cost a good chunk. So
Well, I do know, also a little behind the scenes aside, I do know that they were kind of worried about that on this episode because, as we know, also talking about the beginning of the fourth season, they spent so much money on that episode, Way of the Warrior, because I mean it brings Worf in. We see the beginning of the Klingon conflict. There's a lot of fighting, a lot of battles that happen in an episode. We see Cardassian ships destroyed, Klingon ships everywhere getting blown up and stuff. The station's under attack. There was a lot of moving parts in that season opener. So,
right,
a lot of money went into that to make it kind of big, a big to do coming
right,
into the fourth season. So then here we are at the end of the fourth season, and there was a concern about budget. So I guess that they do these budgets on like a seasonal basis. Like here's how much money you have for this season, and based on how season two did, then here's the season three budget and so forth. So I
right,
think they had used up a lot of their money in the
right,
first part. And so here they were at the bottom, and they still wanted the show to go out with a bit of a bang,
right,
but they just didn't have all the money. So
right,
they had to change the bang. So that's why we went more with something very personal, or not we, they went with something very personal for Odo, and then the revelation of the conspiracy that Galron is a changeling.
right,
So it was another way to kind of up the ante without us having to do major space battles or filming in different locations, a lot of them or anything like that. And it was able to keep things very consistent with like sets and costuming and so forth. So that did allow them to spend more money on uh, special effects, and
right.
it paid off because, like we said, Odo looked terrible, which also means he looked great because it
Yes,
looked
yes,
awful. It was
yeah.
a great job on
Well,
that.
even there were even times, yeah, he takes his shirt off or the blanket off. And his like chest was all gooey and
Yeah, he
like
revealed his liquidy middle.
yeah, they spent
Blech.
good money on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, again, I like the fact that pretty much everyone except for Kira and Cork were in the episode, felt consistently they participated. Again, Dax being even then some of the least. And even she got kicked off her station when the changelings came aboard and the Jim Hadar came aboard. They were like, "We need you to vacate
get
your,
up,
your station so we can tell where you're
get up.
going."
Can't sit there
Um,
anymore. It's not your ship.
yeah. Um, Yeah, all of the Jim Hadar, every time the changeling woman said something, they pointed a gun.
Yes, they were instantly threatening. Every time that she would say something and someone in any way put up any kind of fight, they were like,
Yeah.
"Rah, gun!"
Yeah.
Yeah,
You have to
so
wonder if they can turn Odo into a full human, can they just manifest the white is what I'm getting at, the white, the drug they use, the Jim Hadar use, can they just like manifest it out of themselves? Like they just like we need some more, so here you go. Or is that true of anything at all? Like is that a skill of Odo's we
they're
haven't
not
seen really?
they're not glorified replicators.
Well, that's
So
what I'm getting at though, is because like if they can turn into anything and they can make Odo I don't know. We've never seen them like truly like any part of them separate from themselves and stay as whatever that thing was. So I don't think it does work
So,
that way.
you know
But
what? Here's something I never considered before. I'm trying to see if I can tell you about this without it being a spoiler of any kind.
there's
I
a lot to keep in
I don't
mind. So
think I
please
know
don't
there is. There's a
spoil.
lot to keep in mind, and but I don't think I don't think it'll be a spoiler because you haven't seen Picard. But I mean, I think that you're way off from watching Picard. So I, s- I mean, it would be a spoiler for Picard, but I mean, by the time you got to it, I don't think it would take anything away from you watching this show.
Okay.
So, do they really turn Odo human, or do they just make the organs? Do they shape shift him enough that they make you think that he's human? And I bring
Right.
this up because in the episode of Picard in the newest show in the third season, we find changelings who can pass for human, and
Huh.
they can, they can be beamed up and whatever else, and even to the point where in one of the scenes Beverly is doing an autopsy and she cuts out like a chunk of kidney or liver or something, and it's only once it's removed from the body, and even then she has to like really kind of hack at it a bit before it finally loses its cohesion and falls apart.
Huh.
And so it was like that was the reveal was, oh my god, this isn't a kidney at all. It's
Right.
changeling matter. And
Right.
so like they are scanning and everything else, and they're like, no, it reads as a heart, it reads as a liver, it reads as a whatever.
Hmm.
So in this episode, we see that they have made him human, but did they really make him human, or did they just alter him and make it to where it was impossible for him to change his shape anymore?
Well, I mean, Dr. Bashir does pull blood out of him, and that doesn't just turn into
But
changing
again,
a bit.
even in
Yeah.
but even in the episode that we saw in Picard, they do that. They run a series of
Mm.
tests, and the person
So liquids,
breathes as a human.
liquids are able to be
I mean,
pulled out.
yeah, everything. It wasn't until because if I remember correctly in the scene, it wasn't until they pulled, I think, let's just say it was the liver. They pulled it out. She cut a hunk of it out, and then she was scanning it and subjected it to this intense radiation, and she does all of this stuff to it before it finally starts to, jiggle and dissolve.
Right.
you know so like she had to like hardcore, put some pressure on this thing before
Right.
it finally gave out. But
Right.
otherwise, I mean, when she cut it out of the person and was holding it and laid it, it was still in the shape. It still did what it was supposed to do. So I mean, he takes the blood and puts it in the little stasis tube or whatever, but he doesn't do anything else to it after that.
Right.
So it would still look like and read as blood, and that would be it.
Well, I mean, so we know that a test to find out if someone is a changeling is to try and take blood from them. So yeah, it does seem like they really did turn him into a human on some level, because when his blood was
Yeah.
removed in this episode, it wasn't reverting in any capacity.
But that's what I'm saying though. Like he took the sample, he doesn't do anything else to it. In the Picard episode, it
Right.
wasn't until she started doing extra things to it that it broke down. It still held up on its own until then.
Maybe the changelings are supposedly gotten better at doing their thing by
Well,
Picard.
there's a whole thing in the episode or in the series as to why these changelings are the way that they are. But yeah, it still is implied that they had this ability, and then there's kind of like they're subjected to some other torturous things that kind of make them hold shape longer and whatever else. So it's kind of like they just evolved this ability.
Right.
So maybe like the Great Link changelings knew about it, and that's why it was so painful for Odo when they were we saw him being tossed around in there. They were subjecting his body to this intense change that they can actually do,
Right.
and at that time, because again, Picard is set some 30 years after Deep Space Nine and so forth. So
Right.
maybe during those interim years they learned about this and whatever else. So To me, that makes some sense. Also, considering some things that are going to happen in later episodes, which I'm not going to talk about, but we'll get there. For
Right.
some other people, some other aliens that come around and whatever else, we'll get to them.
Right.
But yeah, to me, it would seem to imply that while they made him appear more human and past the initial scan of being human, that maybe it's not as permanent as we
Right.
think. So
Okay. All right. Well, oh, there was something else I want to talk about, but do you say something?
no, I was going to ask any final thoughts, any
Oh,
last
Garrick in
bits.
this episode, we didn't he and Worf got that fight, which, as we already pointed out, I guess, is that Garrick got the better of the fight in an unexpected way.
I'm
um,
going to just say he surprised Worf. He didn't get the better of him. He surprised him.
I was surprised
Um,
though that Worf took 3 hits or so before he like really
Before he
started.
finally retaliated. Like,
Yeah.
right, he lets Garrick hit him 3 times solid before he finally, lays the
Well, and
smack
then
down.
then they tussle, and then Worf kicks his butt, and I was just surprised because like Worf is always training in the hollow deck, hollow suite. I would figure that he would be like pretty ready for an attack and also able to withstand it probably a little bit better. I feel like he got knocked
Yeah,
on his feet a little quickly. Is what I'm getting at.
yeah.
But yeah,
I feel like the close quarters and the surprise that Garrick hit him
right.
kind of,
Yeah, it is a weird space. Like he had to crawl into the space to get to
yeah, and
Garrick.
then they were really quite close while they were discussing their philosophical opinions on genocide.
Right.
Um, you know,
I was a little
but yeah.
surprised that Garrick was allowed to be brought on the ship, frankly, even to ask the question of like, are there any Cardassian prisoners? But I did like the idea that he was allowed by Cisco to stay by being the distraction that kept Odo from thinking too much about his condition. Like,
Mhm.
I want you to go keep him busy because you're a spy. And I'll go tell half truths, full out lies, and keep him busy for as long as necessary. And he basically implies that he was the one who assassinated a Romulan ambassador.
A
He was
couple of
just
Romulan ambassadors.
he was just
He
a
implies
lowly
that, yeah,
gardener.
he was on Romulus and just was laying waste to people, or that it just so happened that while he was on Romulus,
Right.
all of these people died.
And
So
it's funny
yeah,
too because Odo, before he that scene, or as before things continue on, we see him come back, and Odo's like, "I don't think you killed that ambassador, but I do think you killed this person." So
yeah,
like he's like, "I'm not believing all your lies, but I actually do think you probably did kill this like more minor official." And I imagine if we were to get the more details, it would turn out this minor official was actually more important in the long run than the ambassador in some capacity. Like someone might have killed the ambassador. I think they even were implying that like the Romulans were killing their own ambassadors or something.
yeah. Which
Um,
is, it probably they probably were.
yeah,
Romulans. Romulans love a
ruthless.
good. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but I like the idea that Garrick, being the true master that he is, was actually knowing not to, you don't knock out the big thing, but like a Jenga tower, you know exactly where the true weaknesses are, and you take out what you really need to take out to collapse the whole thing. Um, yeah, I like it was I was surprised that Garrett came along, especially because he was a part of the last episode
hmm
with body parts. Like we just had him, but he's back again. It's like okay, but he did contribute. It's not like he had no reason to be there, and it was a good question to ask. Like, are there any Cardassian prisoners? Can I basically earn my way back into Cardassian society by being the negotiator that gets the Cardassian prisoners of war back? Unfortunately, the founders take no prisoners, apparently.
absolutely not.
I mean, I wouldn't either if you tried bombing my entire
And
civilization,
let's not
but
forget, he wasn't just, and Garrick wasn't just asking out of this semblance of civil duty to his fellow Cardassians. He was particularly close to one Cardassian who, as far as we know,
mm,
died in
I
this
hadn't really thought about that.
thing.
That's true.
Yeah, so Enabran Tain
That's right.
is at the very least missing. But if you want
Presumed
to take,
dead. Yeah.
yeah, if we want to take what the female changeling says to heart, and Auburn Tain is dead. But that would have been his. We know how Garrick was affected by Tain,
Right.
so that would have been the real reason that he was asking because he wants to know the fate of his mentor. Which
Right.
again, if we take her at her word, this could also explain how he went from asking questions to let's blow them all up because they
Right.
killed Tane, and he
Right.
wants to make sure that this man gets his revenge and a revenge worthy of Tane. And what better revenge would there be than to complete the mission he had started
Right.
all that time ago and wipe out the
Right.
founders in their new home world.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Man, I can't believe that was last season that all happened.
I know it
Man.
just it really does seem like it was a lot longer than that because season 4 has just so many beats to it. So many different things happen in this season, which this is why I've always said that season 4 was such a pivotal season because it changes so many things
Right.
about this show and it changes the whole direction and tone of the show because we're starting to get more into the threat that is the Dominion and the destabilization of the Alpha Quadrant,
Right.
with the Klingons going to war, the Cardassians were not really sure what's going on with them. So much political upheaval on the side of the Cardassians and what's going on with the Bajorans. And, the Federation just seems so far removed from everything. So, we're having to just kind of deal with these three powers in this area. And the Federation always just seems to arrive so late to the party. And you're
Right.
almost just like, what are y'all doing? Like, why are you not paying attention? And it
Right.
just doesn't seem like they're showing up until it's just always too late. And
Hmm.
Cisco and company are really having to figure things out on their own. So,
Right.
but I love this season, and can't wait for us to get into season 5. So,
Yeah, man.
final thoughts on this episode before we close out Broken Link.
Yeah, I think it's a good one. And big change for Odo. We'll see how that affects the future. Um, then yeah, we got some Klingon war saber rattling. We got a changeling impersonating Gowron. That'll be important. Um, I assume by the time we start the next season, Kira will no longer be pregnant with the O'Brien's baby. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I think we got some season 5. We'll have to start off with a bang. So
Well, we will get some pregnancy hijinks. That is true. So we will have to wait for all that as we go into season 5. As always, you can watch all of these and every other Trek show again, except for Prodigy, which has been removed from all streaming platforms with really no explanation as to why. On Paramount Plus, and keeping you updated on all things Trek. The release of Prodigy, not Prodigy, of Discovery, the final season of Discovery, has actually been pushed back to mid 2024. I know I had been
mm,
talking about it, saying that it was coming out in October. That is now cut. Apparently, there were some scenes that needed to be reshot and some rescheduling and things like that were supposed to happen that couldn't happen because of the
the
writer's
writer's
strike.
strike.
So now I hear that a tentative deal has been struck on that end on the writer's strike. So with that, everything's going back into production. And again, the final Discovery season will be out in 2024. They
Right.
don't have a definite release date. They just said mid 2024. It could get sped up. It could be pushed back even more. I don't know. But either way, 2024 seems to be when that's going to happen, which is really just kind of sad because now it'll be 2 years since season 4, that we get to see the final part of this Trek show. Um, I loved Discovery. I think that it had a lot of potential. I hate that it got messed around by so many of these little, you know, I'm going to use the term political, but it's not really political
Right.
things that were going on behind the scenes.
Well,
So
actually, Perry, we could say that we're gonna do an After Dark episode
we
as
are
a
going to do an after dark because we just finished season 4. We like to do these
yes.
little wrap up episodes. So if you tune in here in like 10 minutes, you might get to see it live, or at least you'll
And
hear it.
Perry, you can part of what we're going to talk about is your take on modern Trek. I've listened to some people out there who are a little more down on the modern Trek. You're definitely a fan, so that's one of the
I,
questions I want you to answer
yes.
for us.
Okay.
So that's a little teaser for like if you're watching on YouTube. like right this moment, you can listen to us in like 10 minutes, but the episode on podcast will come out like
like
in a week
in
or
a
two.
week, right?
Yeah, we'll
So
delay
yes,
it a
and
little
so
bit.
and for those of you who listen who are so totally down on all the new Trek except for Strange New Worlds, which for some reason you're everybody's in like this we must protect at all costs thing. Um, I do encourage you to tune in, and hopefully, it will help you to at least lighten up on your perspective a little bit and give some of these newer shows a chance. But we're going to get into all that here in just a minute. So, again, thanks for listening to us this week. You can find us and follow us anywhere that you happen to do your social medias. As David told you earlier on, we are on everything: Facebook, X, whatever that is. And you can listen to us where anywhere that you happen to listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. So, guys, until next week when we'll do the After Dark, and then also the week after that when we finally get into season 5, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.